Today we are looking at a case from the beginning of the 20th century, so sit back as we go to England. Emma Byron was born in London in 1878, but ever since she was a child, she was known as Kitty. Her father was a brewer and produced beer for a number of public houses across the capital. It was a good business and enabled the family to live in a nice house in the central London area of Pimlico, which was the southern extension of the very affluent district of Belgravia. Her parents were considered respectable members of local society, and Kitty received a good education. She was a pretty girl and grew up to be a very attractive young lady. However, her situation changed when her father died. Her mother then had no option but to move to a less desirable part of the city, and Kitty, along with her younger sister, went to live in Leytonstone, in London's East End. This was where her elder brother also lived, with his wife and 3 children. Kitty found work as a milliner's assistant at Madame Timmery's dressmaking business in Old Burlington Street in the centre of the city. It was a nice establishment, close to the very elegant Georgian properties in Mayfair, and many well-to-do ladies would visit to purchase their hats and dresses. Things were changing in Britain. Queen Victoria had died in January 1901, and her son Edward VII was now king. In July of the same year, the first UK fingerprint bureau was established at Scotland Yard, and as people went about their daily business, there were motor cars on the streets, as well as horse-drawn vehicles. In early 1902, Kitty met a gentleman named Arthur Reginald Baker. He was the son of a solicitor and was born in 1857 in the Sussex town of Crawley, so was 21 years her senior. In 1880, he had married a lady named Miss Alexandrina Mabel Turner, and together they had a daughter. The marriage was not always a happy one, and they eventually separated in January 1902. Kitty seemed very fond of a sophisticated and well-educated gentleman. She would refer to him fondly as Reggie, and they started to spend much time in each other's company. In mid-July, Mr. Baker took a room on the first floor in a house owned by a widow named Madame Adrienne Laird. She had come to England from France and lived at 18 Duke Street in the St James's area of central London. It was a good location, very close to Mayfair and Belgravia. A week later, Kitty arrived at the property and introduced herself as Mrs. Baker. Everything went well until October of the same year, when Mr. Baker asked Mrs. Laird if he could relinquish one of the rooms. He had started to experience financial problems, and Kitty had been dismissed from her employment for poor timekeeping. Madame Laird agreed to the new arrangement. She considered that Mr. and Mrs. Baker were a pleasant and respectable couple, the type of people that she liked to rent her rooms to. Madame Laird's opinion, however, began to change when she started to hear the couple frequently arguing. She realised that Mr. Arthur Reginald Baker was not always the charming gentleman that he tried to portray himself as. He would often drink, and when he did, he became abusive and violent. On the 4th of November 1902, he was served with a divorce petition from his wife, Mrs. Alexandrina Mabel Baker, and Kitty was named as co-respondent. Following the serving of the divorce petition, the arguments between Mr. Baker and Miss Byron became louder. On Friday the 7th of November, their argument was so heated that Miss Kitty Byron was forced to leave the room. She appeared in her nightdress on the landing, looking very distressed. Madame Laird could no longer tolerate the loud exchanges between them. The following day, she gave Mr. Baker notice to leave. 2 days later, on Monday the 10th of November, Mr. Baker apologised for the noise that had been coming from his room and asked if he and Mrs. Baker be allowed to stay for 1 more week. He said that this would give him time to seek alternative accommodation. Mrs. Laird agreed with his request. At about 11:15 that morning, Kitty Byron went to see Madame Laird. Madame Laird told her about the new arrangements, that they would be able to stay for 1 more week. But Kitty was not very concerned about it. She said that next week, Madame Laird would hear something very dreadful. When Madame Laird asked what that might be, Kitty replied that she could only say if she promised not to tell Mr. Baker, as he would be most angry with her, and when he is like that, he gets violent. Madame Laird said that she would keep anything that she was told in confidence to herself. Kitty then told her that Mr. Baker's wife had served divorce papers on him. Divorce was not common at the time, and the only ground that a woman had to divorce her husband was adultery. They were not permitted to divorce for abusive behaviour. Earlier that year, Earl Russell had spoken in the House of Lords about allowing men and women equal rights to divorce, but his proposed bill was rejected. Madame Laird was very surprised by what she had been told. She had always believed Miss Byron to be Mr. Baker's wife. She asked, why would she put up with all his ill treatment towards her? Kitty replied that she loved him. Madame Laird also asked why she screamed so much, and Kitty said that she cannot help it, as he strangles and beats her. Kitty then told Madame Laird that she was going to stay with her sister, while Mr. Baker remained for a final week in the guest house. As Kitty returned to her rooms, she passed the maid on the stairs. She sometimes had short conversations with the maid. Her name was Isabel Kingett, and she had been in Madame Laird's service all the time that Kitty had been staying there. Kitty told her that she had told Madame Laird all about herself and Mr. Baker. At around midday, Kitty went out. The 10th of November 1902 was the day of the Lord Mayor's Show. This is an annual event that dates back to the 13th century, where a new Lord Mayor is appointed, and there is a public parade through the streets of London on the day of the inauguration. Kitty, however, was not interested in joining the many onlookers who lined the streets to see the procession go by. Instead, she went to a shop at 211 Oxford Street to try and purchase a strong-bladed spring knife. The salesman, named James Moore, was surprised that a young lady would purchase such an item. The price was 6 shillings, but Kitty asked if he would sell it to her for 5. Eventually they agreed on a price of 5 shillings and 60. The young gentleman asked if she would like him to wrap it for her, but Kitty replied that she would carry it on her person. She then made her way to the post office at Lombard Street. It was quite busy, and people who were waiting to be served noticed that she seemed quite worried. When it was her turn at the counter, she asked if she may send an express letter by post office messenger to Mr. Arthur Reginald Baker at his work at the London Stock Exchange. The cost of this was 3.5d. The message simply read, "Dear Reg, I want you a moment. Importantly, Kitty." The messenger was 16-year-old William Robert Coleman. He went off with a letter, but unfortunately was delayed due to the large crowd that had gathered in the streets to see the Lord Mayor's Show. When he arrived at the Stock Exchange, Mr. Baker was not there. He waited for 15 minutes before returning to the post office. Miss Byron was most displeased and asked for the young man to try and deliver it again. Master Coleman did as he was asked, and this time he was able to find Mr. Baker, who duly opened the letter. He then got up and made his way to the post office. He arrived at around 2:30 in the afternoon and immediately went to the counter, where he spoke to one of the clerks. Much to Mr. Baker's surprise, he was asked to pay 2d, due to the messenger having to wait longer than 10 minutes for him at the London Stock Exchange. Although it was only 2d, Mr. Baker refused to pay. He said that it was nothing to do with him, and it was the business of the lady. When Kitty saw him, she hurried to the counter. Mr. Baker, however, did not seem at all happy that he had been asked to leave his work to come and meet Miss Byron, and angrily told her that she owed the post office money and should pay it. She told him that he should pay, but Mr. Baker said that he would have nothing to do with the payment. She tried to give him a coin and asked him again to pay the 2d. He was not amused and put the coin in his waistcoat pocket. He then started to make his way to the door. Kitty followed him. They left at the entrance that led onto King William Street. People who were entering the post office, at the same time Mr. Baker and Miss Byron were leaving, observed that Mr. Baker did not look very pleased. He was arguing with the young lady beside him, not in a particularly loud way, but it was apparent that they were having a disagreement. Suddenly, Kitty pulled out the knife that she had purchased earlier in the day and stabbed Mr. Baker 3 times. It happened very quickly, and passers-by were stunned at what they had witnessed. Mr. Baker fell to the floor. Attempts were made to assist, but everyone soon realised that the gentleman was in a very bad way. The police quickly arrived. There had been more police on duty due to the parade. Crouched on the steps, they saw Miss Kitty Byron. She was being restrained by a member of the public and was sobbing by the body of the gentleman who was later confirmed to be Mr. Arthur Reginald Baker. As tears streamed down her face, she was crying out, oh Reggie, let me kiss him." The police arrested her, and Mr. Baker was put in an ambulance and taken to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, which was nearby. But tragically, he died before arriving. Kitty was escorted to the Cloak police station. She was no longer sobbing and now looked extremely agitated. Inspector Frederick Fox was on duty, and when he informed her that Mr. Baker was dead and that she would be charged with murder, Miss Byron replied, "I killed him willingly and he deserved it. The sooner I am killed, the better." However, later she changed her statement and told the inspector that she had only bought the knife to hit Mr. Baker with, and she did not know that she was actually killing him. Nevertheless, Miss Emma Kitty Byron was charged with murder. 4 days later, the funeral of Mr. Arthur Reginald Baker took place at the Norwood Cemetery. The trial began at the Old Bailey on the 15th of December 1902. The court was full. Many very smart-looking gentlemen who had worked with Mr. Baker were in court to see the proceedings. In fact, it was members of the Stock Exchange who had funded Miss Byron's defence. The press had been very sympathetic towards Kitty in the reporting of the story, and she had also received great support from the public. The terrible way that Mr. Baker had treated her had resonated with many Londoners. Women's societies who had tried for many years to have a greater voice spoke about the case and the suffering that Kitty had gone through. In 1902, many women were still unable to leave their husbands, as they did not have the financial means to do so. And although since the death of Queen Victoria the previous year, opinions were starting to change, divorced women were often viewed as outcasts. When Kitty Byron arrived in the dock, she was clearly very nervous. She looked around at the packed court with some trepidation. She had dressed well, still only 23 years old, and an attractive young lady. The eyes of the court were firmly upon her. Madame Laird, the landlady at 18 Duke Street, where Miss Byron and Mr. Baker had lived, gave evidence. She informed the court of how it came about that Mr. Baker rented a room and was later joined by the defendant, who she had always believed to be the wife of the deceased. She told how Mr. Baker would come back to the house drunk and how she would hear loud arguing coming from the couple's room. She said that she believed that he was beating the defendant. She did, however, say that when he was not drunk, he was a perfect gentleman. Madame Laird's maid, Isabel Kingett, told the court that Miss Byron was a very pleasant young lady, and although Mr. Baker was terrible when drunk, he seemed very fond of her when he was sober. Other witnesses included the clerks of the Lombard Street Post Office, who outlined what happened from the time the defendant entered their workplace. A gentleman named William Locke, who had been walking along King William Street at the time of the murder, he told the court that he heard a loud cry and then saw the defendant attacking the deceased. He said that he ran to the stairs and took hold of the defendant's left hand. The knife then dropped to the ground. He added that the defendant shouted, "Let me go see Reggie, my dear Reggie," to which Mr. Locke told her that he would not let her go and continued to hold her until the police arrived. The defence claimed that Miss Byron had only purchased the knife in order to threaten to take her own life if Mr. Baker did not stop his violent outbursts, and that she had only attacked him in a fit of rage after much provocation. They claimed that in no way was it pre-planned. When the judge summed up the case, it was apparent that he did not consider that the claim of the defence that the murder was not pre-planned and was committed more in self-defence had any merit. He then sent the jury out to deliberate. When they returned, they told the court that they found the defendant, Miss Emma Kitty Byron, guilty of murder with the recommendation for mercy. Nevertheless, the judge sentenced her to death. Despite her perceived status of being lower class than her victim, during the trial, Kitty had gained even more sympathy from the press and the public. A petition was raised, which was signed by over 15,000 people, and was then sent to the Home Secretary, asking for the sentence to be commuted. On the 23rd of December 1902, the Home Secretary agreed that the sentence should be reduced to life in prison. Kitty was then sent to His Majesty's prison in Aylesbury, where in 1907 her sentence was reduced to 10 years. She was released on the 17th of December 1908 after serving a total of 6 years in prison, with the stipulation that she was to stay for some time at Lady Henry Somerset's Home for Reforming Females, which was near Reigate in Surrey. Miss Emma Kitty Byron was then released unconditionally, and after that, she disappears from history. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As you know, I really value all your comments and feedback. so please leave any that you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case.